Hello! We are here with yet another literal round table discussion of a Star Wars movie. And like I said in the previous one we did of these, I think we were getting burned out by Star Wars movies that weren't exactly good. So it's nice to go to something that's at least a little bit more enjoyable, but I think all three of us had an interesting experience rewatching this thing.
Certainly did.
You watch the prequels, and so many lines from those movies are like memeable now, and so you look back on them, and like the whole entire Reddit and Facebook culture just basically thinks this movie's amazing because it has these lines like, "It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!" So uncivilized and all these things, but when you look at it with scrutiny, we get what we have to talk about here today.
Almost every character in this show has something quotable, almost, that's turned into a meme. Like, Yoda has one, good relations with the Wookiees I have.
Yeah.
Or,
Ki-Adi-Mundi,
Droid Attack on the Wookiees, Mace Windu, a Sith Lord.
A Sith Lord?
It's just like, this movie is supposed to be like the dark, serious one. But like 90% of it is turned into memes nowadays.
It's kind of funny to me because of that exact reason, that it's kind of whitewashing how people thought about the movie back in the day on a critical level, but because those memes are funny to us and we now have different application for everything that it says, we're suddenly like, okay, that's better, that's humorous, when it's supposed to be this dead serious moment that's actually treated with lots of gravitas. But no, we're laughing because, what about the droid attack on the Wookiees? That's hilarious right there. They're slaughtering Wookiees. That's just the funniest thing I've heard all day.
Well, Master Skywalker, there's too many of them.
Which, by the way, is one of the boldest scenes of the whole movie.
It is, and I'm sure we'll get to it for
I
sure.
dare say that's one of the boldest scenes in Star Wars because it took something that you would expect to see from a distance, namely Order 66, and it made it really graphic and up close.
Yeah, and I mean, that moment itself, the one I was quoting, of course it's a meme now, but you are right. Like, it is evidence that George Lucas recognized that this isn't just for kids anymore. He actually wanted to tell a story that not only felt more mature because it was violent per se, but because, it actually showed how dark they were willing to go to basically get what they wanted. Anakin kind of, but Sidious mostly.
Yeah.
Like the original trilogy at this point, it never really had extremely dark moments, I would say. Like there were things that were implied to be dark, like when Han Solo got tortured in episode 5.
And the encounter on Dagobah.
And even like when they blew up Alderaan. Like you would think that, this is this super dark moment, and it's treated with seriousness. But at the same time, it's so distant, it's so clean. It just, one laser, boom, it's done.
And you have one line about it, where Obi-Wan's like,
I felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced.
That's the whole part of it.
That's all the darkness that is shown. But in 3, they drag that darkness out for an hour and a half before you start to realize, wow, this is the big tragedy of Star Wars right here.
Which is funny, because when this movie was being advertised, they advertised this as, specifically, if I remember correctly, because a little while ago I went back and watched, the trailer for this movie was brilliant. When it shows Obi-Wan talking about 1,000 generations, the Jedi's were the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy. And then it's like, before the dark times, before the Empire, and then you see Anakin, and then it's like, a young Jedi named Darth Vader. It was a pupil of mine, and you watch Anakin kill some people, and it was really brilliant, but I got down a rabbit hole on YouTube. Like, if you think about it, this movie is like almost one of the saddest ones in the whole mythos.
It probably is.
This one is like the saddest one, because you watch Anakin at the beginning, he's like, happy-go-lucky, I'm a Jedi, I'm gonna be a good guy.
This is where the fun begins.
And then you watch him take mistake after mistake after mistake, to where at the end he's Darth Vader. He's completely 180 from what he is at the beginning and what you see in the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
I'd say for that exact reason. One of the things that I was thinking about when I was watching this is that I consider 3 to have the most potential out of any movie in the Star Wars series. Because
I can see that.
the events that happen in 3 define the entire series.
That is true.
Like, everything that happens in 5 is really important, really cool, but it doesn't define 7, 8, 9. It doesn't define 1, 2, and 3. Every single aspect of the Star Wars movies goes back to 3. And so the potential here is astronomical. The moments, especially because you consider there's 3 major villains, 4 if you count Darth Vader. There's more battles in this than there are in any other movie. There's more scenes where these different things can be happening. And so the potential is there for this to be the most important and biggest Star Wars movie of them all.
Yeah, I think that's important. I don't know, especially when I was rewatching it, I felt like it actually was a movie with an impact and something that George Lucas intended to have a ripple effect on the other movies, kind of like what you're saying. You know, you watch the Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones, and sure, they're Star Wars movies, you can watch them, but when you're watching them, you think, how much does this really impact the whole entire story, you know? Because you shouldn't really have a prequel or a sequel for that matter unless it's really gonna matter, or if you're just making it to, you know, to entertain people. But both of those movies don't really accomplish either of those goals, whereas Revenge of the Sith actually does that, you know? It does something for the Star Wars saga, but it actually is like, you know, even though it's dark, it's a fun movie to watch too.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in EMT, we had something called EKG, where you'd hook it up and then you could see how somebody's heart was working. You know, like when they do the movies and it's like, doop, doop, and it shows a little like one. So this movie starts like the first 45 minutes. You get the attack on General Grievous's ship. You get the attack on Count Dooku. You get Anakin cutting off Dooku's head, which is actually a big scene because it's kind of his first. Not his first step, but it's kind of his step that takes him down his path through the whole movie.
Yeah, and it's well done too.
Yeah, but you get up to this part where you're like, yeah, and then it just goes, and you have the whole dialogue with Padme about how she wants to raise the kid on Naboo, and
You're so beautiful.
It's only because I'm so in love.
No. No, it's because I'm so in love with you.
So love has blinded you?
then it starts back up when you have the dragon water scene. I'm not even sure what's really going on, but you have the tragedy of Darth Plagueis, and then it picks right back up, and you're like, oh, this is really interesting, and the Jedis are like, maybe he's not the chosen one, and then it kind of ramps up from there. But like, it kind of goes and then stops, and then it picks right back up. It lost me for like a good half an hour of like just, oh my gosh, this is so cringy.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we having this in the movie? It's the same problem that episode 2 had.
You know, I didn't feel the pacing as badly as you did. Like, I definitely agree that there were some cringy moments, because that scene with Anakin and Padme on the balcony, both of them really, people don't talk like that. Even when they're Twitter-pated and whatnot, you know, they're not gonna just be like, because I'm so in
The
love.
whole "love is blind" conversation just made me want to leave the room.
It's
Just
so bad.
Come back in a few minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And it's filmed in such a flat and lifeless way too. The way they're like cutting between those actors and like the CGI background too. It's like, it's so obvious that it was just, they didn't know what they were doing in terms of the filmmaking.
Right.
But that's beside the point. You know, like I still think that a Star Wars movie doesn't always have to have a lot of action to be, you know, consistently entertaining.
Yeah.
And like a lot of those scenes are actually pretty interesting, because they set up, you know, things that are going to be impacted later in the story. You know, like Anakin being disappointed that he's not granted the rank of master.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the premonitions that he's having, and then, you know, setting up the conflict on Utapau and all that whatnot.
Maybe I need to retract my statement. It's not necessarily like there's a big dip. It's just those parts where they're talking, like, slows down the story enough that I'm like,
They stand out.
It's arguable that the quality is different between the different sections.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because you talk about that first opening battle scene, which I consider to be one of the best singular scenes in all of Star Wars.
Oh, it's terrific.
Because has so much, and I can talk about it for an hour because it shows their characters so well, it shows their relationship so well, it shows Star Wars really well. But anyway, so you have that amazing scene, and then you'll go to Coruscant, where it's obviously that the quality is just stopped. They wanted to tell the facts to get to the next point of the story where it's actually cool again.
Right.
Well, it doesn't help that they're basically, filming this on a.
Oh,
It's like if they were filming a stage play in a high school, but instead of just having like a regular stage, the whole entire like theater area was covered in just a green fabric everywhere.
Can you
That's
imagine
basically
the
what it feels
difficulty,
like.
yeah.
Yeah.
The difficulty of being an actor in that kind of situation when you're not really, when acting is literally all you're doing because there's no reality that you can hold on to.
Yeah.
There's no scene that you can say, this is good, this is what I can work with.
Yeah.
You're just looking at a whole bunch of green all around you.
Yeah, and that's at least something to very much appreciate about the Disney Star Wars films because even though there's obviously CGI sets in that one too, you don't feel it like that. Those films feel a lot more authentic.
They feel like real places.
I feel like they've gone the extra mile as far as realism, because if you've watched some of the documentaries about like Force Awakens and Last Jedi, they Rian Johnson, call it what you may, the casino scene, they built that whole set from scratch.
Oh yeah.
And it's full of life, and there's a bunch of stuff going on, but it's not CGI. Like all the tables, all the drinks, all that stuff in there, the costumes was all legit. Episode 3 kind of suffers from the same thing that we talked about with Episode 2. And really Episode 1, where they just kind of were relying a lot on the green screen. Oh, well, the VFX guys will take care of that. And, I mean, they pioneered a lot of stuff and techniques and stuff, but, like, they sacrificed a lot of the realism.
I mean, imagine what James Cameron would have done if he directed these movies instead. The guy who directed, like, Avatar. Imagine if he took those CGI sets and did something different there. Do you think those movies could have improved? Like, actually?
Well, it would have taken a decade longer for them to each come out.
That's true.
I guess the 10 extra years does help with adding a little bit of realism to your CGI graphics. We've already discussed the whole memeing aspect of it, but looking at it critically, some of these lines are horrible. Some of them are fine, and some of them are like, okay, yeah, this is good. This is moving the plot along nicely, or this is good humor to show like how these characters are interacting well with each other, like Anakin and Obi-Wan in the opening battle scene.
Yep.
Great humor with each other and great chemistry. But then there's lines like literally everything that Mace Windu says.
I feel so bad for Sam Jackson. He deserves so much more.
And you and I were talking about this earlier, Zach, but everything that Palpatine says is just hammed up evil on a scale of 11.
What's funny about this is we were kind of, when I was watching it, I was kind of texting with you guys back and forth about what was going on in the movie.
Uh-huh.
And I find it so hard that, Jedi have been around for, eons or however long, millennia. And most of the people on the council are, seasoned Jedi masters. I just don't understand how they've been around. I mean, obviously the plot has to in the movie, but, you would think that they would have, realized, hey, we should probably look into this guy. He just hangs out by himself, wears weird, dark colored clothes. He sounds creepy. We should maybe investigate and maybe see if he's a Sith Lord.
Has gothic paintings on the wall and actual Sith statues in the front hallway.
Right.
You would have thought the warning signs would be there.
And when literally one of the Jedi says, the dark side swirls around the Chancellor.
It's like, maybe we should look into that.
Possibly.
But remember, guys, innocent before proven guilty.
Okay. Still.
You could have just had Anakin repeat word for word anything that he said and oh, he's guilty. That's proof enough right there. It boggles the mind. Because they do say on multiple occasions, like the original trilogy, that Anakin was wise as well. He wasn't just powerful, he wasn't just good at using the Force and flying. He was actually a wise individual and considered worthy to be on the council.
You kind of is a bumbling teenager in this movie.
Except he's not. He's like 28 in Star
I
Wars.
know, but
Oh, he's like 22 at that point or something.
wasn't the Clone Wars 10 years long?
No, it was 3.
I remember it being 10 years in the old.
It was 10 years, but sorry, I'm such a nerd. 10 years between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones,
I know that. Yeah.
and then Clone Wars was like a 3-year span.
Even still, he's supposedly wise enough to be a great commander in battle, but in this movie, I realize that the movie's supposed to be under a lot of stress and people do weird stuff when they're under stress, but still, he just acts like a scared kid most of the time.
Yeah, he's more reactionary than actually like logical.
Yes.
You know?
I noticed when Palpatine said the exact same thing, I need you to spy on the Council for me, but he worded it differently than the Council did. Anakin completely accepted, like, yeah, that's fine by me. But as soon as the Council asked him to spy on Palpatine, he's like,
They want me to spy on the Chancellor. That's treason.
I can't believe you would make me do this!
Oh,
This is so offensive!
You know, I didn't think about that, but yeah, you make a good point.
Like, he just worded it slightly differently, but he still said, I need you to be my eyes and ears on the Council. And yet Anakin's like, yeah, that's perfectly fine, sir. You're my friend. We've just, like, been together for so long that I trust you implicitly.
I will say this, though. As much as Palpatine's dialogue is a little bit, like, sugar-coated and stuff, that scene where him and Anakin are sitting in the theater thingy, watching the space dragon things float through the bubbles, that scene, I was like, for all the dialogue and stuff in this movie, that scene was brilliant.
I like the cinematography of that scene.
Yes.
Yeah, it actually is pretty well done, unlike most of the movie. But, one point that I want to touch on for that, too, is something that got me thinking about, like, the lore of the Jedi versus the Sith, and how it relates to other things that happen in other movies in the Clone Wars. It's like, Palpatine, as much as he's trying to manipulate Anakin, he makes a really good point that, like, the Jedi and the Sith aren't really that dissimilar at all.
The Sith and the Jedi are similar in almost every way, including their quest for greater power.
The Sith rely on their passion for their strength. They think inwards, only about themselves.
And the Jedi don't.
Palpatine's such an interesting character for that matter, because he's almost like a representation of, like, who the devil is. Someone who will take actual truth and, like, twist it just enough to convince someone to think the wrong way ultimately.
Funnily enough, George Lucas would disagree with you on that point. Because that's why he hated Knights of the Old Republic 2. He absolutely loathed the story for Knights of the Old Republic 2.
Why? That game's awesome.
Because the concept that they're two sides of the same coin was not something that George agreed with. I know, he's the one that established everything in 3, but he always preferred the idea that light side is good, dark side is bad, that's how it is. That's the good side versus the bad side, and good needs to win in the end. And that's something that KOTOR 2 kind of threw out the window, because they were trying to establish that everyone is, well, it's too deep to go into it.
Everybody's got kind of it's more moral ambiguity than light versus
dark. A little bit morally gray.
I still believe in those core themes too. I mean, that's a lot of what religion is too.
Yeah.
But
it's just funny that he would that theme is kind of expressed really clearly in 3, even though that's not something that he would agree with when he's talking about Star Wars personally.
Yeah, I think that is interesting to think about, though.
Mm-hmm. You know what's funny? Speaking of this, they're two sides of the same coin. There are parts in this movie that the Jedi kind of contradict each other. Well, there are a bunch of times, but the one that comes to mind pretty clearly is when they're in the Jedi temple at the end, and they just find out that Anakin turned to the dark side, and Obi-Wan needs to go find Anakin, and Yoda goes,
"Destroy the Sith. We must."
20 minutes later, Anakin and Obi-Wan are getting ready to fight on Mustafar, and Obi-Wan goes,
"Only a Sith deals in absolutes."
It's just like, what are we talking about?
That's another one of those lines.
That's an
where it's
absolute
like,
right there. Come on.
I have never understood what that meant. Never.
I was like, huh?
Is Obi-Wan trying to say that, well, us Jedi, we're so accepting of the shades of gray in between good things, and I'm like, No, you're not. Like, the Jedi have never... Like, Obi-Wan, you might be, but that's because you had Qui-Gon as a teacher, and he was pretty much morally black for a Jedi.
What Obi-Wan really meant in that scene is that, Anakin deals in the absolute brand of vodka.
Oh my gosh.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
That would explain a lot, actually. Anakin was just drunk the entire movie.
I mean, he's just waddling around and he's like, "You will not take her from me!"
That whole scene is just... He like... I know it's supposed to show, like, the Sith rage or whatever, but, like, Hayden Christensen, like, dials it up to, like, 100. He needed it, like, 8, and he dialed it up to, like, 100, and he's, like, frothing at the mouth, and... You will not take her from me! You can hardly understand.
Which is generally, like, my favorite acting from Hayden Christensen in the entire movie, because it's just so over the top. It's fun.
Yeah.
Like, I'm reminded of reading, like, fan fiction that's been made by teenagers, like edgy teenagers. When I watch this movie, I think of that, because edgy teenagers sometimes have really fun, dumb ideas.
Yeah.
Like, they're still writing cool things, they're just horrible at writing it. And so that's what I felt like this entire movie, like, ooh, let's watch Grievous on a giant wheel with claw arms on it. That's really cool.
Oh, you reminded me of something I'll have to talk about later, but anyway.
But we have these really cool ideas, like the claw wheel, or like the Magna Guards with their vibro staves, and like we have all these cool things in the lava scene and the entire fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin, but that's just really dumb too. It's so cool, but it's so dumb, but it's so cool.
Yeah.
The part in the Senate fight though is this time around I was just like, oh, that is so cool. But
like
really
I said, I prefer that fight.
Really, the premise of that fight is they wanted to show that they're both powerful by throwing those little circle like disc things that the senators fly around in. But it was just like, if we really wanted to be powerful, why don't we pull out like The Last Jedi where Yoda calls down lightning or something? Like, that would have been cool to see in, like, the Senate building. But no, let's throw them. And then
I'll throw the Senate at him. And the whole Senate.
Don't forget to spin it first.
I was gonna say,
Yoda has to, like, spin it first before it can actually be thrown.
Yeah, building momentum.
I was going to say, Yoda he spends time going, like, catching it, and then he's like... I never understood that. And Palpatine's just like,
he's just
look at spinning!
Oh, and then he's like, oh.
No, my favorite part is like... and then he jumps down.
Like, as much as I love the actor for Palpatine, I don't think he was meant for these, like, action-oriented scenes.
Oh my gosh, the Mace Windu and Palpatine fight is
he's so
bad.
He lacks any grace whatsoever.
It's
you can see
so
that in the Yoda
bad.
fight, and you can see that in the Mace Windu fight, especially. There's the one cut when he jumps over and does his little spin move and the Sith yell, or whatever they call it in canon.
Sith yell.
But he does the spin move, and then he lands, and then he, like, sits there for a bit.
Oh,
That somehow kills an entire, like, 2 Jedi by itself, and I'm like, what is this?
Well, apparently, when I was a little kid, I watched, like, all the featurettes just because I was bored. But apparently, George Lucas wanted it to be, when he was making that scene, he wanted it to be personal. So he wanted Samuel L. Jackson and Palpatine's actor to be, like, have close-ups of them. And so, like, they took, like, 3D imaging of their faces, of them doing different expressions. But he wanted them to actually be there doing the choreography. So really, it's like Samuel L. Jackson in his, however old he was when he was doing this. And Ian McDiarmid was like 70 when he was doing this. So it's basically just, really, it's like it's like New Hope when they did the gently poke at each other with lightsabers. It's really like that with Mace Windu spinning and leaving himself completely open for an attack. And Palpatine just like, I'm not going to kill you yet because the story demands that I don't kill you yet. But it's just like, dude, what were we thinking? And then in that same fight, you have like a couple times during the fight where they cut to like CGI, and it shows them like flipping around and doing all these cool moves, and then it cuts to them moving, so it's like...
You mentioned something that I feel is a big part of my criticisms of this movie, is that I'm not going to do something because the plot demands that I don't right now.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
during the original Dooku fight, I felt that there was like no weight behind anything there. Obi-Wan, he gets beat up. He doesn't even do anything that entire fight. He gets beat up and thrown across the stage twice. And then that's it. There's no weight because it feels like, okay, now we're just going to watch, and Obi-Wan's over there, so Anakin can look cool now, and Anakin's going to slowly win despite Dooku not showing any skill whatsoever in the lightsaber fight. And okay, and then this is going to happen. It just feels like that all the time, that something is not looking as good as it should because, oh, well, we need this to happen so that the plot can happen.
Yeah.
So that the original trilogy can happen.
One thing I grew to like is that at the very end of that scene before it cuts to like the shot of Grievous's ship hovering over Coruscant, Anakin says that thing.
His fate will be the same as ours.
I like the subtle foreshadowing there. Like you get hints of that throughout the whole entire prequel trilogy, but that specific line, like all three of those men are going to die eventually, and they're all going to basically become one with the Force. So I like the subtle allusion that Lucas made to, all of their fate being the same with Anakin saying that.
There is a good scene between Padme and Anakin where they don't look like two cardboard standees that just are like have like a radio behind them saying stuff. When Padme lands on Mustafar and she starts to see that what Obi-Wan was saying was legit, and you start to see her go, you're going down a path that I can't go. Like, that was like the first time in the whole movie that I was like, or in the whole interactions between the two characters where I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
they are actually a couple. This is heartbreaking.
Yeah, that is absolutely the one scene that I would think of that in both the movies that those two actors are in. And there's actual genuine chemistry in that moment.
Right.
And it feels tragic. And maybe it's just John Williams' music, because John Williams'
I think
music
it
in
is.
this movie
Yeah.
is the best of any of the prequel movies.
As far as music goes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The music is just absolutely stunning. And for all the problems that scene does have, with the dialogue and everything, like, it feels impactful, it feels tragic. And it's carrying on that same feeling that we've had since Order 66 started.
Right.
And it's just like the culmination of Anakin's story arc right there.
Mm-hmm.
Not like, I think that's the end of his arc. Everything with Obi-Wan, that's just like,
That's part of Obi-Wan's arc.
falling action.
Yeah.
But like, at that point when he decides that his empire is more important than Padme.
That scene didn't work for me as well. Like, I like the idea of it, but there are just so many problems with like the blocking of the actors and the dialogue that like it kind of felt cringy to me. I think I actually like the scene more when Anakin wakes up after having his first like death premonition of Padme. Like with the way that obviously it's kind of cheesy that he's walking out like shirtless and has a little robe on, but then
Yeah, I can see where Kylo Ren gets it.
Thanks,
a thick boy.
Yeah.
But eventually he's sitting there on the balcony, and like the lights slowly come on, and like it kind of sets the mood of this kind of like, I don't want to necessarily say dramatic, but at least just a scene that's supposed to set up the conflict of the movie.
Yeah.
I think even if the chemistry isn't the greatest there, I think there's more going on with the filmmaking there than just amping up the score. But I don't know. It was just something I was thinking about.
I would argue that there's literally only one good moment in all of Episode 2 of Anakin and Padme's relationship, and that's right when they're about to get wheeled out to their deaths.
Oh, that is
on
true.
Geonosis.
That is true.
But even that, it could mostly just be argued that it's John Williams' score again. That it's just.
I mean, John Williams is John Williams. He's a legend.
I always thought that the fight happens and Anakin spectacularly gets destroyed. When he gets his arms and legs cut off. And like that part with Ewan McGregor was impactful.
He nailed it.
Like he nailed it completely. And you have Anakin where he sounds like he has something stuck in his throat. And he's just like and he's just shouting at him, and Obi-Wan's like in the throes of misery, and Anakin's like, sounds like Strong Mad from Homestar Runner.
Yes.
strong man.
Ewan McGregor, he was a delight this entire movie. From
Yeah.
the very beginning to him waking up in the elevator shaft. Did I miss something? Like, just every time that he opens his mouth, it's fun.
Genuine gold.
It's Star Wars at its best.
When he wakes up in the elevator shaft, you see him like hanging, and he opens his eyes and he's like,
Yeah, that's good acting.
did I miss something?
Yeah.
We're in a bit of a situation here. When Obi-Wan is chasing General Grievous and he has the wheel bike and the lizard and the whatever it's called, I think it's called a boga, if I remember correctly.
Something.
It's the lizard mount thing that he's riding around. So they're chasing. Yeah, they're chasing around, and like for the first couple 30 seconds of that scene, it's just the sounds of them racing. And you hear the wheel bike and like, zzzz, and then the lizard, he's like, whoosh, and he's like, and falls right behind him. There's nothing here. Like, okay, this is just, I don't know. And then when Obi-Wan jumps on, John Williams' music pops right on. You're like, oh, I can get into this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The sound design was so hit or miss for me in this entire movie. Like, there's some things that sounded so good. Referring back to the space battle when they're actually opening fire on each other like side to side, and you're hearing like the big guns go off and the cannon shells are hitting the ground.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's like great sound design, and you feel like you're in the middle of this big battle. But then it gets to stuff like the droids talking to each other.
Oh my gosh. That is my biggest problem with this movie.
They neutered those droids.
These ushered in this movie particularly. Well, episode 2 kind of had it at the end where they had the quippy battle droid that switched heads with C-3PO. And I guess they thought that was a good idea because in this one they gave personality to the battle droids, and it's just like non-stop through this movie. When General Grievous walks past, or when the battle droid that's escorting Obi-Wan and Anakin onto the bridge to see General Grievous, and the battle droid walks past him, he's like, "Excuse me." It's like, "You're welcome." It's like, come on.
And they even got the super battle droids on it too. Like, those guys were intimidating in number 2.
And then they're basically just like slightly lower pitched voices of the regular battle droids. Like, those are Jedi fighters, alright.
What's that? It's like, no.
Get back to work. They don't even say, what's that? They literally say, what that? There's incomplete grammar in the droid speak.
It's just, see, and what, like, this movie starts that out, and then Clone Wars made the battle droids insufferable. Like, I could never.
I enjoyed some of their.
I didn't like the battle droids, and once they started having personality, I really didn't like them that much. There are good parts in Phantom Menace where the battle droid's like, that doesn't compute. You're under arrest. Like, that part was funny, but like when they start like speaking their mind, I was just like, why are we doing this?
I think for me that just goes back to the potential. Like, you have this faceless, terrifying army, and then the potential of it is that they are absolutely awesome. That's the potential that they have. But then when you actually see that potential in action and it's wimpy voice personality droids, then you're like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. Like, or look at General Grievous. His potential is incredible as a villain.
Yeah.
And then what do we get? We get coughing. And he doesn't even stand a chance. Like, the fight with General Grievous and his Magna Guards on the bridge of the Confederation, it's so pathetic. Like, they're not even trying. They're just like, oh, Magna Guard destroyed, Magna Guard
And
destroyed.
going back to your droid personality thing, like, I cringed so hard when Obi-Wan pulled down that, I don't even know what it was.
The big
but like,
crate?
Yeah, he smashed almost all the Magna Guards, and there's one who's crawling away, he's like... Like, the sounds he was making, it sounded like a yelping puppy.
Yep.
It was bad.
It's true.
And then every time that General Grievous actually fought, except for the final fight on the wheel and then leading to the platform, he was pathetic too. Like, his whole twirling lightsaber things, Obi-Wan's just like, zap, zap, and both arms are gone.
I'm glad they at least made him a lot more intimidating in Clone Wars, because even with the spinning...
Even in Clone Wars, like, in the original Clone Wars, that's a whole different story. But in
Oh,
the
true. That's a fair point.
But like even in Clone Wars, he still is like ha 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 ha. We're intimidating. I think he kills one. There's one episode where he's awesome.
The Grievous hideout one is the
Yes.
best.
Yes.
But every other episode, he's back to number 3, General Grievous.
Well, and to be fair, they probably just did that for consistency's sake.
Yeah.
They can't make things too different from the movies to where it's noticeable.
And I
But,
agree with that.
yeah.
And it is for kids, and so you can't have like a super terrifying, intimidating villain like he has the potential to be. But like that's just my point with the whole potential thing.
Yeah.
You have this potential for this amazing fight with Count Dooku. You have this potential for Sidious's dialogue to be really subtle and corrupting for Anakin. You
Yeah.
have the potential for all these different things. And sometimes the movie reaches that potential. And that's what I'm trying to say is that there's so many good parts of this movie, but then there's parts where that same potential that just comes so short.
It's true.
That's fair. Well, we've been talking for quite a while. I'm not sure how much storage is left on my camera, or battery life for that matter. But are there any final points we want to make before we close out?
The sound of Yoda's nail scratching on the
Oh
center
my
platform
gosh.
haunts my dreams.
That is true.
It's
It's like nails on a chalkboard. Every time I watch this movie, I'm like, no, please don't.
I hear it every single time.
Well, the sight of it makes me cringe more, like in a good way.
You
in a
even
good
see
way.
it like dragging along the.
Like it makes me cringe in a good way though, because like I feel bad for Yoda, but yeah, the sight of it mixed with that sound. I'm glad you brought that up because like it makes you wince.
It's like, oh, like him getting knocked off the platform and thrown 50 feet, oh, that's fine. But him like scratching the nail as he's falling,
Oh yeah.
I will pass.
I also think that this is maybe my just personal opinion, but I think that when Padme and Anakin, when she's dying and Anakin's being rebuilt into Darth Vader, and he comes up and and he's like, is she all right? It seems in your anger you killed her, and he's like, and he kind of has this little weird grunt thing, which that's not the part I'm talking about because that part sounds kind of weird. But it cuts to Sidious, and you just see his face go, like he has this devious smile. No, I don't know. I can't do
grimacing the entire time. Like, this is my apprentice.
Well, I can't do him justice. But the part that I like about that scene is like, once he realizes that Padme's gone, like Vader is completely in the Emperor's clutches. Like there's nothing tying him to being Anakin Skywalker. He is Darth Vader at that moment. And he gets up and he breaks out and he yells, "No!" And I find that no is okay. I mean, they added it to Return of the Jedi, and that's travesty, by the way.
Yes.
But the part where he says no is like the ultimate, like, in that operating room, Anakin Skywalker died, and out pumps Darth Vader.
He's more machine than man.
He's more machine than man now. Yep. I thought that was a really good scene.
Plus the whole mirror image of him on the table and then Padme on the table.
I was about to say, yeah, and they both die and something else is born out of that. So that, like I said, it's very poetic in that sense.
Force symbolism is still symbolism, so it still works. Yeah.
No, and it's good. Like the music, the editing, and the acting especially. Like I like how in Chris Stuckman's review of this movie, one thing he pointed out that I appreciated more upon him mentioning it was right before Anakin has the front plate of his helmet put on him.
Oh yeah.
He has this moment where like his eyes widen, and you can tell that like in that moment he just has this fear of what's going to become of him. You know, he's like,
You done goofed up.
you done messed up, Anakin.
Yeah, pretty much. The other part of that that's really that I thought was kind of cheesy this time around was when Padme, she's like 4 breaths away from dying, and she has Luke. She's like, Luke. It's like, where did she come up with? It goes back to your point.
Practice.
It goes back to your point where it's like, I'm only naming you Luke because
You're supposed to be named Luke.
New Hope says that you have to be named Luke. Or like when Leia pops out, it's like, you're only named Leia because Princess Leia is in New Hope. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that was one of the parts I was like, oh, okay.
Like that whole finale felt like really rushed to me. It's like, oh,
The
we
very
need
final,
to get
like,
all
last-
this stuff in about the original trilogy.
Last 5 minutes for sure. Yeah.
Plus, the whole nurse story was the best part of the movie. Ooh, bah. Ooh, bah. With the like the scooper arms.
Yeah. Oh, that's weird. It's weird to think about.
Just like, oh, there's the baby. So
Speaking of stuff that I didn't catch until you pointed it out.
no.
Oh yes, this is what I wanted. This is what I wanted to talk about the whole review.
Dude, I'm telling you, if you watch that part, there is something funky with it, with Obi-Wan's arm. I don't know what happened, if it's an Easter egg, what have you. His arm does a complete 360. Like, do you remember in Winter Soldier when, like, Black Widow hits the Winter Soldier's arm with the ion thingy and his arm goes, and he, like, goes, and he rips it off and then his whole arm goes, and it goes back to regular? That's what Obi-Wan's arm.
Yeah.
He like has the gun and he's like, and he's like so uncivilized.
Yeah. To provide context, like we're talking about when right after Obi-Wan kills Grievous and like Grievous just literally explodes. Obi-Wan gets up and he's holding the blaster in his hand. And like like you said, I didn't notice until watching this again, upon looking at this at further scrutiny, his right arm literally like goes like this.
So uncivilized.
Was there something wrong with his arm when they were shooting this? Was it like some kind of green screen effect where it disappeared in post?
The Velcro strap that was holding the gun to his hand got stuck, and so he had to like twist it off.
It doesn't even look like that though. Like it's like this digitized warble effect on his arm. Like
Turns out Ewan McGregor never even went to shooting. They just had the CGI in the entire time. This is his fake voice. That's where the entire CGI budget went.
Given how this movie was made, I would believe it. Overall, like we've like the previous two movies, we've nitpicked and we've talked about legit issues, but personally, I enjoy this more than the previous two.
Yeah.
Not as much as I used to, but it's passable enough, and I'd give it like a C+ probably.
This used to be when I was little. It came out when I was like 10.
Same
and
here.
it was super popular when I was like 9 and 10. Like it was like Star Wars was popular, and they had the lightsabers and the action figures and everything. When I remember thinking that this one was my favorite one. I mean, then I grew up in Empire Strikes Back. Made more sense to me.
Then you wisened up.
Yeah. This one's probably a 7. I mean, it's like a 7.5 because it's good. There are parts of it that I really like, and like there are parts of it that I'm just like, what are we doing here?
That's fair.
Personally, like I said about the whole potential thing, the movie does live up to that potential. The opening battle, the entire final battles between Yoda and Sidious and Anakin and Obi-Wan. Order 66 was handled very well. I just didn't like most of the rest of the movie beyond that. Like, there was lots of good parts, but they were just so spread out between lots of stuff that, all right, let's pick up the pace. And so I just felt personally...
Thanks again for watching, guys. Ultimately, this was a fun discussion for us to record, and I hope it was fun for you to watch. Next month, we'll have a review for Solo: A Star Wars Story, so look forward to that, because, it only gets better from here.
It's true.
This was an entertaining movie, too, but, like, in terms of genuine quality, we're coming up on some good stuff.
Right. The next, 4 movies are pretty good. 4 movies. Return of the Jedi is pretty good. We have different Return of the Jedi. Mostly because of the special edition. Anyway, more to come. It'll be a good time.
Yes. Enjoy your Endgame tomorrow. Well, by the time you see this video, Endgame will have already been out. So I hope you will have enjoyed Endgame, and don't spoil it for anybody because we're going to be spoiling it.
No spoilers.
And thanks again for watching. Bye bye.
So long.